Okay, sports fans, we're back. So, we're going to start off with the first idol, which is the idol of the tribe. And in paragraph 9 on page 545, Bacon writes, "The human understanding is of its own nature prone to suppose the existence of more order and regularity in the world than it finds. And though there be many things in nature which are singular and unmatched, yet it devises for them parallels and conjugates and relatives." And so here, rather than speaking against Aristotle and Aristotelianism, he's actually posing more ideas that come from Plato and Platonism. One of the things that Plato believed, and then subsequent natural philosophers adopted, was the idea that there were these sort of Platonic forms, there were these Platonic solids, things like perfect spheres, perfect pentagons, etc. So when the earliest natural philosophers are looking at the planets and how they travel, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get what they observe to fit into perfect forms, perfect pre-existing Platonic forms, because what they want to do is they want to import or impart more order to what they've observed than what they've really seen. He's got this great section here where he says, Bacon says, "And therefore it was a good answer that was made by one who, when they showed him hanging in a temple a picture of those who had paid their vows as having escaped shipwreck, and would have him say whether he did not now acknowledge the power of the gods, 'Aye,' asked he again, 'but where are they painted that were drowned after their vows?'" So I thought that was just sort of a wonderful little turn of phrase there. We notice what ratifies our prejudices. So we come along looking at something, we have a collection of beliefs, and the things that ratify what we already believe in, we see and we observe. And the things that sort of question our beliefs, we would tend not to even notice. In paragraph 12, he makes mention of Zeno's paradox. And for that distinction which is commonly received of infinity in time past and in time to come, can by no means hold, for it would thence follow that infinity is greater than another, and that infinity is wasting away and tending to become finite. Zeno's paradox is one you might be familiar with. It says, you can't really walk across the room, because in order for you to walk all the way across the room, you first have to walk halfway across. And then before you can do the remaining half, you have to do half of it. So the fact that any length can be infinitely divided into sections, at least in words, says if you have to go halfway before you go all the way, you can never go all the way. And one way to refute that is to just stand up and walk across the room and get to the other wall. So again, it's one of these issues where in the symbol system, which is language, we can create these things that can't possibly happen, but in the reality of a room, it's pretty easy to walk to the other side. There's a reference down at the bottom of page 547 to discovery of causes, and there once again we see the four causes that were Aristotle's: material, efficient, formal, and final. They got picked up by the scholastics. The scholastics are the people who are largely religious-based scholars. They're living in monasteries, they're reading the ancient texts, and they're sort of thinking and writing, but they're not getting out into the real world and doing observations. All right, so on page 548, he's talking about the fact that we don't even know about the essential nature of air, and indeed he's correct. So he's writing in 1620. It's not until 1774 that Jacob Priestley, was it Jacob Priestley? No, I think he's got a different first name. Priestley comes up and sort of discovers oxygen. In Robert Boyle, 1660, about 40 years after this, he's able to produce a vacuum. So we have these natural philosophers who are doing things with experiments. Bacon is aware what they don't yet know. They don't even know the composition of air. So he's pretty well educated and pretty well attuned to what is the state of science at his time. One of the things he says, "For sense by itself is a thing infirm and erring, neither can instruments for enlarging or sharpening the senses do much." This is 1620. 1632, Galileo has a pretty good telescope and is able to say things about the moon and Venus. So actually, 12 years later, Bacon's claim about these instruments of improving our senses won't do much is materially refuted by Galileo's success. But again, there are people who wouldn't look through Galileo's telescope, or upon looking through it says that's an illusion. So there is some truth to the idea that just getting a better view with an instrument isn't going to solve the problem. Again, on the top of page 549, we see him speaking against someone. Matter rather than forms should be the object of our attention. Its configurations and changes of configuration and simple action and law of action or motion. For forms are figments of the human mind unless you call those laws of action forms. So again, this is anti-Plato rather than anti-Aristotle. When you get to the idol of the cave, he's talking about those people either because they fancy themselves the authors and inventors thereof, they become attached to an idea. So there are multiple cases where some scientist, some philosopher comes through with a breakthrough and he's got this grand idea. And then what happens is everything after that has to fit into it. And if it turns out the idea is flawed, he or she will be unable to make any progress because they're unlikely to see the flaws. What they're going to keep doing is saying somehow the observations were wrong because they didn't perfectly match my theory. So there is closer to an indictment of Aristotle. When he is talking in paragraph 21 about for that school is so busied with the particles that it hardly attends to the structure, and while the others are so lost in admiration of the structure that they do not penetrate to the simplicity of nature. Imagine someone who's focused on anatomy, and on the other hand, someone who's focused on molecular biology. So what he's advocating is you've got to go both macro and micro. And if you're tuned in too much to looking at the fine-grained stuff, you're going to miss the whole structure. So there's that saying about you can't see the forest for the trees. Let thus such then be our provision and contemplative prudence for keeping off and dislodging the idols of the cave. So once again, Bacon is a master of meta-discourse. He will guide you through his essay by saying, okay, we're done with that now, and we're going to go on to something else. He's got an interesting thing in paragraph 23, the idols of the marketplace, and he was surprisingly prescient in terms of problems of linguistics. Linguistics did not yet exist as a formal study. It didn't come up until basically it was almost 3 centuries later before linguistics arrives. But he realizes that we have a collection of words, and we have this collection of words to talk about force. If our words are attached to old ideas, and we've got some new ideas, we can't really use our old words. And so contemporaneous with Bacon, there's a group called the Royal Society, and what they're very intent upon is getting these technical terms. So one word has one word meaning. And although that might work in mathematics, it doesn't really work in natural language. Bacon was aware of the problem, and he had a particularly sophisticated understanding of the problems of language, and you'll see a lot of that in paragraph 23. One of the things he talks about is we have words for things that don't exist, and we have no words for some things that exist. So think about, we have a word for unicorn. Just having a word for unicorn doesn't mean they exist. Similarly, you could say maybe the word angel is a lovely word. There's a lot of history. We've got all kinds of accounts of angels, but that does not mean that they exist. And one of the things that the scholastic philosophers that preceded Bacon would have been doing was making arguments about how many angels can fit on the head of a pin. Well, possibly infinitely many, especially if there's no such thing as an angel. It's only a word. Similarly, the word soul. We'll get into discussions about the existence of the soul, arguments about it, but if there is no such thing as the soul, then what we have is a word which is really empty of any material content. So up through paragraph 25, he's talking about the problems of imprecise language. When we get over to paragraph 28, he's now in the idols of theater. He has another simile, and he's talking about but the course I propose for the discovery of sciences is such as leaves but little to the acuteness and strength of wits, but places all wits and understanding nearly on a level. For as in the drawing of a straight line or perfect circle, much depends on the steadiness and practice of the hand, if it be done by aim of hand only, but with the aid of a rule or compass, little or nothing. So it is exactly with my plan. So what Bacon is offering here is a plan that might be called a plan for a good and right epistemology. He's helping us understand how we should use our mind and our senses with respect to nature to learn things and what to avoid. In paragraph 29, he goes into the poetical compression of some philosophical theories. So that's the idols of the theater. So it's not like you've gone to a theater, but it's like well-written philosophies are a lot like plays in terms of how finely wrought and crafted they are.